The doctor's hands were trembling. I noticed because she wasn't looking at the ultrasound monitor anymore, the screen where my baby's heartbeat blinked steadily in shades of gray. Instead, her eyes were locked on my medical file, on the name printed neatly at the top. My husband's name. Without warning, she reached over and shut off the machine, just like that. In the middle of the exam, it felt as if someone had unplugged my entire existence. "Mrs. Reed," she said quietly, her voice almost breaking, "I need to speak with you alone, right now." She guided me down the hallway into her private office, closed the door behind us, and locked it. My thoughts spiraled instantly. Something was wrong with the baby. That had to be it. My heart slammed against my ribs. My palms were damp. I couldn't breathe properly, couldn't focus on anything except the pounding in my ears. Then she spoke. "You need to leave your husband today, before you go home, and you need to contact a divorce attorney first." I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. "What?" I said. "That makes no sense. We're married. We're expecting a child. We're happy. I don't understand." Her face looked drained of color. "That's exactly why this is so dangerous," she replied. "What I'm about to show you will completely destroy everything you believe about your marriage." She paused, then added, "But before I explain, you need to know how you ended up sitting in this chair, 4 months pregnant, about to learn that your entire life has been built on lies told by the man you sleep beside every night. My name is Alina Hart. I'm 32 years old. I work as a marketing director at a small but successful firm in Connecticut. I come from what people politely refer to as old money. 5 years ago, my grandmother Margaret Hart passed away. She left me her estate, roughly $2.3 million secured in a trust, along with the historic Hart family home. That house had sheltered 5 generations of women who loved, struggled, raised children, and survived. I never showed it off. I built my own career. I drove a decade-old Subaru. I bought my morning coffee from the same local cafe every day. That inheritance wasn't who I was, it was simply a safety net. But it also made me a target. I just didn't realize it yet. I met Lucas Reed 4 years ago at my family's annual charity gala. The Harts had hosted it for generations. That night, I was standing near the bar, desperately trying to escape a conversation with a man who had asked about my finances within 3 minutes of being introduced. Then Lucas appeared. Dark hair, confident posture, a relaxed, effortless smile. He asked what I was drinking, cracked a joke about the awful jazz band. Not once did he mention money. He said he was a financial consultant who had received a last-minute invitation from a colleague. He even claimed he had no idea who the Hart family was. Looking back, that should have been my first warning sign. A financial advisor who doesn't research the hosts of a major charity event is like a chef showing up to a cooking competition saying, "Oh, we're making food." But I was exhausted by men who saw dollar signs before they saw me. And here was someone asking about my favorite novels instead of my net worth. We dated for a year. Lucas was everything I thought I wanted, attentive, affectionate, and thoughtful. He remembered tiny details most people forgot, the way I took my tea, the song that made me cry, the name of my childhood dog. I thought I was safe. I was wrong. Lucas always insisted on paying whenever we went out, even though I could have easily afforded the entire restaurant. It made him seem sincere, almost old-fashioned in a way that felt comforting. My mother, Catherine Hart, wasn't fooled for a second. After meeting him for the first time, she pulled me aside and lowered her voice. "That man's smile," she said. "It doesn't reach his eyes. Something about him is off, Alina. I can feel it." I brushed her off immediately, told her she was imagining things, accused her of being overprotective, maybe even jealous. We argued about Lucas constantly, until eventually we stopped arguing at all. 2 full years passed with almost no communication between us. No phone calls, no visits, just short birthday messages. That was it. 2 years of silence between me and the woman who raised me. All because I chose to trust my husband over my own mother. And yes, she was right. She's been waiting very patiently for the moment she can finally say, "I warned you." At this point, she's more than earned it. Lucas and I married after a year of dating. The ceremony was stunning, held at my grandmother's estate. Everything looked perfect. He cried during his vows, real tears, his voice shaking as he promised to love me, protect me, stand by me forever. Looking back now, those may have been the most honest tears he ever shed. Not tears of happiness, but relief. His long game was working. After 2 years of trying to conceive naturally, we finally visited a fertility specialist. The results were brutal. Lucas had severe male factor infertility. His sperm count was nearly 0, and the few that existed barely moved. Natural conception wasn't just unlikely, it was practically impossible. He looked destroyed. In the car afterward, he cried for 20 straight minutes, apologized again and again as if this was some personal failure. I held his hand. I reassured him, told him we'd face it together. That's what marriage meant to me. What I didn't know was that those tears weren't grief. They were calculation. His plan hadn't failed. It had just become more complicated. We decided to move forward with IVF using ICSI, a procedure where a single sperm is injected directly into an egg. It was our best option. Lucas insisted on handling everything. He researched clinics on his own, chose one he claimed was ideal, took care of the paperwork, managed all the communication. At the time, I thought he was just being supportive because I was emotionally exhausted. The first cycle failed. I was shattered. I stayed in bed for 3 days, barely speaking. Lucas stayed beside me, holding me, whispering encouragement, promising we'd try again. 7 months ago, the second cycle worked. 2 pink lines. A positive pregnancy test that changed everything. I cried tears of joy. Lucas wrapped his arms around me, already talking about nursery themes, baby names, the future he said he'd always wanted. Then, almost casually, he suggested I update my will, now that we were becoming a family. I thought it was thoughtful, responsible, the kind of thing a loving husband would bring up. I had no idea he was already treating my grandmother's inheritance as his own. Everything felt perfect. A devoted husband, a baby on the way, the life I'd dreamed of since I was a little girl playing with dolls in my grandmother's garden. I didn't know that in just 3 months, a woman with shaking hands would place documents in front of me that would reduce that perfect life to ashes. And I had no idea the fire had been lit by the man who slept beside me every single night. Now back to the story. By the time I was 4 months pregnant, something in my marriage had shifted. At first, it was subtle. The kind of changes you notice but immediately rationalize because admitting the truth feels far too dangerous. Lucas started placing his phone face down wherever he went, every table, every counter. He added a new password I didn't know. When calls came in, he'd step outside to answer them, returning moments later with a vague explanation about work and a quick change of subject before I could ask anything. He claimed these calls were about restructuring client portfolios. At 11 o'clock at night. On a Saturday. Now, I may not be a finance professional, but I'm fairly certain the stock market doesn't operate on weekends. Unless Lucas suddenly had high-profile clients overseas, which he absolutely did not, something didn't add up. Then came the late nights. Once or twice a week became 3, sometimes 4. He wouldn't come home until midnight. This was a financial advisor, not an emergency room doctor. What kind of crisis demanded that schedule? Then I found the receipts. A high-end restaurant downtown I'd never been to. $280, dinner for 2. A hotel in the city, only 40 minutes from our house. Why would my husband need a hotel room that close to home? When I confronted him, Lucas had explanations ready, too ready. A client dinner, critical networking. The hotel, a conference that ran late. It just made more sense to stay overnight than drive home exhausted. And when I asked follow-up questions, His tone shifted. "Alina, you're being paranoid," he said. "It's pregnancy hormones. My mother warned me about this. Women get irrational when they're pregnant. Don't become one of those wives." I felt embarrassed for even questioning him. That's how skilled he was. He made me apologize. Around the same time, the financial pressure began to escalate. Lucas's requests about money grew more frequent, more urgent, more inventive. "We should add my name to your trust," he suggested. "What if something happens during delivery? I'd need access to funds for the baby. It's practical." He pushed for power of attorney next. "Every married couple does this, unless you don't trust me." Then came the house. "Your grandmother's place is too big for us," he said. "We should sell it, invest the money properly. I know exactly which funds would bring the highest returns." He wanted me to sell my grandmother's home and hand him control of the money. This was the same man who needed 3 different streaming services because he couldn't remember where his favorite shows were. And I was supposed to trust him with over $2 million. No. When I refused, carefully, gently, his warmth disappeared. He became distant, cold. He started sleeping on the very edge of the bed, claiming I moved too much now that I was pregnant. The arguments intensified. He'd bring up the trust. I'd say no. He'd stop speaking to me for days. Interestingly, his silent treatment always ended the moment he got hungry. Apparently, even his principles had a time limit, and that limit was an empty stomach. He barely touched me anymore. He blamed my changing body, said he didn't want to hurt the baby. On the surface, it sounded considerate. But deep down, it felt like rejection. I tried to talk to him. He accused me of being needy, emotional, difficult. I started wondering if I was the problem. Then one night, I woke up at 2 a.m. Lucas wasn't in bed. I found him in the kitchen, hunched over his phone, speaking in a low, urgent whisper. I stood in the hallway, barely breathing, and listened. "It's almost time," Lucas was saying into the phone. "By spring, everything will be sorted. Just wait." Then he froze, saw me, hung up immediately. "Work emergency," he said casually when I asked. "Go back to sleep, honey." I didn't ask who has work emergencies at 2 a.m, about everything being settled by spring. I was too tired, too pregnant, too desperate to face the truth that my marriage might already be broken. A week later, my best friend Tara Monroe came over for lunch. She sat across from me at the kitchen table and watched me make excuse after excuse for Lucas, his stress, his work pressure, his adjustment to becoming a father. Finally, she put her fork down and fixed me with that look, the one she'd given me since college, the one that never lies. "Alina," she said quietly, "listen to yourself. When's the last time you talked to your mom?" I didn't answer. "When's the last time Lucas was genuinely happy to see you? Not putting on a show, not pretending, just happy to see you walk in the door?" I couldn't answer that either. "Trust your instincts," Tara said. "Something is wrong here." I told her she was overreacting, dramatic, but that night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything. Lucas's phone always face down, the late nights, the sudden obsession with having access to my finances. The way he looked at me sometimes when he thought I wasn't noticing, like I was a puzzle to solve, not a person to love. 4 months pregnant, I had a routine OB appointment for an ultrasound. My usual doctor was on vacation, so I was scheduled with a colleague, Dr. Evelyn Brooks. I went alone. Lucas had a client meeting he couldn't miss, nothing unusual. I lay back on the exam table, cold gel on my belly, waiting to see my baby dancing on the screen like always. Dr. Brooks was professional and friendly, chatting lightly as she prepared the equipment. She asked how I was feeling, if the baby was moving much, all the normal questions. Then she opened my file. Her expression shifted. She glanced at the paperwork, then at me, then back at my husband's name. Her hands began to tremble. She set down the ultrasound wand and turned off the monitor completely. "Mrs. Hart," she whispered, I need to speak with you in private, right now. Every worst-case scenario hit me at once. My mind raced. Something must be wrong with the baby. She guided me to her office, closed the door and locked it. Then she spoke words that shattered my world. I know what your husband has done, and I have proof. Her hands shook as she pulled a folder from her desk drawer and opened it. My younger sister works at your fertility clinic, she said. 3 weeks ago, she came to me crying. She told me everything. When I saw your husband's name just now on your file, I recognized it immediately. Dr. Brooks took a deep breath. Mrs. Hart, I'm so sorry, but you need to see this before you go home, before he knows that you know. She placed the folder on her desk between us. And in that moment, everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my pregnancy, and the man I loved crumbled into ashes right in front of me. Her sister, Molly Brooks, worked as a nurse at the very fertility clinic Lucas had meticulously chosen for our IVF treatment. The clinic he had insisted was perfect. Now I understood why he'd been so obsessed with that particular choice. Dr. Brooks began to explain everything. Her voice stayed calm, even though her hands wouldn't stop shaking. 3 weeks earlier, her younger sister Lena Keller had shown up at her apartment just before midnight. She was crying so hard she could barely form words. She hadn't been sleeping. She'd lost noticeable weight. The guilt had been eating her alive for months, and she finally couldn't carry it alone anymore. 7 months ago, Lena confessed, a patient's husband had approached her at the fertility clinic. He was charming, well-dressed, polite. He seemed anxious but controlled. He told her he had a delicate situation that required discretion. His wife didn't know, he said, but they were using donor sperm for their IVF cycle. Some inherited medical issue on his side that he didn't want to burden her with. He framed it as an act of love, nothing dark, nothing criminal. He just needed help keeping it quiet. And he was willing to pay $30,000. For a nurse earning $52,000 a year, buried under student loans and credit card debt, it felt impossible to refuse. Lena agreed. She helped switch the samples. Lucas's sperm, which never could have resulted in a pregnancy anyway, was replaced with sperm from a paid donor. The embryologist was involved too. Lucas had approached him separately, offering an additional payment. Between the two of them, the manipulation went unnoticed. The embryologist told Lena not to worry. The husband knows what he's doing, he said. What couples agree to isn't our concern. But it was her concern. Especially when she later saw in the clinic records that the pregnancy had succeeded. Somewhere out, there was a woman carrying a child she believed was her husband's. And it was. The guilt shattered her. She couldn't look at herself in the mirror. She called in sick constantly. Panic attacks started hitting her at work. 3 weeks ago, she finally broke and told her sister everything. I sat there as Dr. Naomi Keller explained how my husband had spent $50,000 to set a trap that would make it look like I had cheated on him. $50,000. That was more than he spent on our entire wedding, including the honeymoon. I guess I finally understood where his real priorities had always been. And it was never me. But it didn't stop there. Dr. Keller laid out the entire scheme, the one Lucas had been carefully assembling for more than a year. Phase 1. Bribe clinic staff, switch the samples, make sure everyone stayed silent. Completed. Phase 2. Wait for a successful pregnancy, play the devoted husband, act like the excited father-to-be, build the perfect image. Completed. Phase 3. After the baby was born, Lucas planned to have the embryologist alter the clinic records, changing them to show that the second IVF cycle had failed. On paper, it would look like we conceived naturally afterward. Phase 4. The trap. Lucas would suggest a DNA test. He frame it as something sentimental, a keepsake, proof of fatherhood to frame for the nursery, a celebration of our perfect family. Phase 5. The final blow. When the DNA test showed he wasn't the biological father, and when the medical records supported a supposed natural conception, he'd have everything he needed. Proof. His wife had cheated on him. The baby wasn't his. In his version of the story, Lucas was the victim. Our prenuptial agreement included an infidelity clause, standard practice in families with significant assets. It existed to protect inheritances. If one spouse cheated, they owed the other a penalty of $500,000. On top of that, the cheating spouse lost any claim to the other's property. The wronged spouse could also pursue additional damages for emotional harm. Lucas's plan couldn't have been clearer. At minimum, he would walk away with $500,000. He'd ruin my reputation, and if he pushed it into court, he'd likely walk away with even more. And me. I would have been shattered, confused, desperate to protect my child, exactly the kind of person who wouldn't have the strength or clarity to fight back. He was counting on my shame to silence me. And he almost succeeded. Dr. Keller pulled more documents from the folder. Lena had kept everything. Original lab records showing the altered samples, the donor's identification number, payment trails that led back to accounts Lucas controlled. There were emails, too, between Lucas and the embryologist. They thought they were being smart, personal email addresses, carefully vague wording. But it was more than enough. Lena had even located the donor. His name was Evan Rowe, 28 years old, a graduate student. He'd been paid $15,000 in cash. Typical sperm donations pay maybe $100, sometimes two. $15,000 should have screamed warning. But student loans don't pause for ethics. Evan had been told it was a private arrangement for a couple who wanted extra discretion. He had no idea he was part of a larger deception. When he learned the truth, he was furious and fully willing to cooperate. Then Dr. Keller hesitated. "There's one more thing," she said carefully, something she'd uncovered on her own. Lucas had $180,000 in gambling debt. He'd been gambling for years, online poker, sports betting, casino trips he told me were business conferences, all while presenting himself as a responsible financial advisor with everything under control. And the money he'd used to bribe the clinic staff, the $50,000 he spent to sabotage my IVF and set me up. He'd stolen it. Small amounts siphoned over time from his own clients, carefully buried in accounting records his firm didn't know yet. Lucas wasn't just trying to take my inheritance. He was drowning. The debts were closing in, and the people he owed money to weren't patient institutions. They weren't the kind who sent polite reminders or filed lawsuits. I was supposed to be his escape. My grandmother's money was meant to save him, and he was willing to destroy me completely to get it. I sat in that office for a long time, papers spread across the desk, the truth burning straight through my chest. First came shock, cold, numbing, immobilizing. Then disbelief. I reread the documents again and again, searching for some error, some explanation that would undo everything. But instead, the puzzle pieces began snapping into place. The late nights, the secret phone calls, his fixation on gaining access to my money, the carefully calculated attention when we first dated. He'd researched me long before we met. That charity gala, the moment we accidentally collided near the bar, was no accident at all. He knew exactly who I was, and exactly what I was worth. The way he cried at our wedding, the tears I once believed were from happiness. They weren't. They were tears of relief. His long con was finally coming together. And my mother, Catherine, the woman I had pushed away for 2 years, the one I accused of being paranoid, jealous, overprotective, she had seen through him in less than 5 minutes. His smile doesn't reach his eyes. That's what she said. She tried to warn me. I chose him over her. I thought about breaking down, about screaming, about driving straight home and throwing those documents in his face, watching him scramble for lies. But then something else took hold. Something cold settled in my stomach. Something sharp, focused, calm. Lucas thought I was stupid. He built this entire scheme believing I would collapse, that once his trap snapped shut, I'd be so humiliated by the proof of my supposed betrayal that I'd hand over whatever he demanded just to make the pain stop. He thought I was weak, naive, an easy target. He had no idea who he married. I looked at Dr. Naomi Keller. He doesn't know that I know, I said. No, she confirmed. My sister hasn't told anyone else, and I only connected you to this case today when I saw your file. Good. I gathered the papers carefully. I need copies of everything, I said, and I need you to put me in direct contact with Lena. Dr. Keller hesitated. What are you planning to do? I stood up, resting my hand on my belly. On the baby, completely innocent in all of this. A child who didn't choose their biology. A child I already loved, regardless of DNA reports, donor numbers, or the ugliness surrounding their existence. My husband thinks he's been playing chess, I said quietly. He thinks he's 3 moves ahead. He thinks he's already won. I straightened my shoulders. He's about to learn I already flipped the board. I drove home with my expression perfectly neutral, hands steady on the steering wheel, breathing controlled. Lucas had installed security cameras around our house 2 years earlier. At the time, he said it was for safety. Now I wondered if it was surveillance. If he watched the footage. If he studied my movements. If he searched for cracks. So I gave him nothing. He was waiting when I walked in, standing in the kitchen, wearing that familiar smile. The one that didn't reach his eyes. My mother's words echoed in my head. 2 years too late. How was the appointment? He asked. Is the baby okay? I smiled back, walked over, hugged him, handed him the ultrasound photo Dr. Keller had printed before everything changed. Perfect, I said. Everything's absolutely perfect. I deserved an award for that performance. I smiled through dinner while mentally calculating how much his bail would cost. I asked about his day while imagining him in an orange jumpsuit. I even laughed at his joke about baby names. It wasn't funny, but I committed fully because my life depended on it. I apologized for being paranoid lately, blamed hormones, used the exact excuse he'd thrown at me for months. His body relaxed instantly. The tension drained from his shoulders. He thought he was still winning. He believed everything was still unfolding exactly as planned. That night, Lucas slept peacefully beside me. I lay awake until nearly 3 a.m, staring at the ceiling, quietly mapping out how his world would come apart. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Then I drove 2 hours to a different city, checking my rearview mirror the entire way. Maybe it was paranoia, but after everything I'd learned, I'd earned the right to be cautious. That's where I met Marion Holt, a private investigator, former police detective. 15 years on the force before going independent. No-nonsense demeanor, sharp eyes. The kind of woman who'd seen the worst humanity had to offer and stopped being surprised by it years ago. I told her everything. She didn't interrupt, just listened, took notes, and when I finished, she smiled slowly, like a shark that had just spotted blood in the water. Your husband made a lot of mistakes, she said. Men like him always do. Arrogance makes people sloppy. Give me 2 weeks. She came back with results in 10 days. Lucas's gambling debts totaled $180,000. Money owed to online betting platforms, underground poker circles, and several private lenders who absolutely did not report income to the IRS. The kind of creditors who don't send reminders when payments are late. They get creative. The embezzlement was real. Roughly $53,000 missing from client accounts at his firm. Drained slowly over 18 months through small transactions designed to avoid triggering alarms. His employers had no idea yet. And then there was the affair. 8 months long. His assistant, Hotel rooms, expensive dinners, weekend trips disguised as business travel. Marion had everything: photos, text messages, credit card statements, an entire catalog of betrayal. His assistant. Of course it was. I was almost offended by how predictable it was. If you're going to ruin your marriage, at least show some originality. Sleeping with your assistant is practically the opening chapter of the cheating husband playbook. Not that such a book exists, but if it did, Lucas would have underlined that page. Marion uncovered something else too. This wasn't his first attempt at securing a wealthy partner. 5 years earlier, he dated a woman in Boston, Lauren Whitmore. Old money, trust fund, the full package. They were together for 8 months before she noticed suspicious activity in a joint account he'd convinced her to open. She ended things immediately. Too embarrassed to press charges. Marion tracked her down. Lauren was more than willing to talk now. She'd always regretted letting him walk away untouched. Then there was Lena Keller. I met her quietly, at a coffee shop an hour outside town, somewhere no one would recognize either of us. She looked awful, thin, pale, dark shadows under her eyes. Guilt had hollowed her out. She started crying the second I sat down. "I'm so sorry," she kept saying. "I knew it was wrong. I needed the money, and he was so convincing. I thought maybe he really was trying to protect you from a genetic issue." I stopped her. "I need to ask you one thing," I said. "Are you willing to testify, officially, on the record?" She nodded immediately. "Yes, I'll tell them everything. I should have gone to the police the day after it happened. I was terrified of losing my license, my job, everything. But yes, whatever you need, I'll say it under oath." I studied her for a long moment. This woman had helped my husband try to ruin my life. She had accepted $30,000 to participate in fraud. By any reasonable standard, she was involved. But Lucas had played her the same way he played me. He'd identified her weakness and exploited it. He was the designer of the scheme. She was just a tool he used. "Stop being afraid," I told her quietly. "You're not the villain in this story, he is." Once the embryologist learned that Lena was cooperating, and that she'd kept detailed records, he suddenly developed a very convenient conscience. He gave a full statement to Marion Holt. He was terrified, losing his medical license, prison time, public disgrace. He was willing to say whatever was necessary to make sure Lucas took the fall instead of him. The hardest call I made came next. My mother. 2 years of near silence. 2 years of choosing Lucas over her. 2 years of defending him when she questioned his intentions. 2 years of pushing her away. The phone rang twice before she answered. Elena. Her voice was cautious, hopeful, like she'd been waiting for this call for years, but was afraid to believe it was real. "Mom." My voice broke immediately. "You were right about everything about him, and I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." There was a pause. I braced myself for the "I told you so," for anger, for resentment, for the pain I knew I'd caused by choosing a con artist over the woman who raised me. Instead, she said softly, "What do you need, sweetheart?" That was it. No gloating. No reminders. No lectures about how long she'd warned me. Just one question. And somehow, that broke me more than anything else had. My mother had spent 30 years as an attorney specializing in estate law before retiring. Within 48 hours, she had connected me with the best divorce lawyer in Connecticut and a criminal prosecutor who specialized in complex fraud cases. She taught me something important that day. The people who truly love you don't need to be right. They just need you to be safe. I had spent 2 years choosing a con man over my own mother. And the moment I finally called her, shattered and ashamed, her only instinct was to protect me. That's what real love looks like. Lucas never understood that, because he'd never experienced it. My attorney's name was Helen Morano. She was barely 5 feet tall, silver hair neatly styled, reading glasses permanently perched at the end of her nose. She looked like someone's gentle grandmother. She was anything but. Helen reviewed everything: the clinic records, Lena's statement, Marion's investigative findings, the affair documentation, the embezzlement trail. When she finished, she looked up at me over her glasses and smiled. "Your husband is facing charges for fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement," she said calmly. "And the infidelity clause in your prenup works entirely in your favor now, because he's the one who's been cheating." She paused. "And that little plan of his, to falsify medical records after the birth." She smiled again. "That only makes things much worse for him." "That's a felony," Helen Morano said calmly, "and we have proof of intent." She moved fast. Helen coordinated directly with the prosecutor. Lena Keller provided a formal, sworn statement to the police. The embryologist agreed to cooperate fully in exchange for reduced charges. Fear has a way of sharpening one's conscience. Lucas's firm was discreetly notified about the missing funds. They launched an internal audit and immediately revoked his access to all client accounts. A judge reviewed the evidence, the paper trail, the statements, the intent. Probable cause was established. An arrest warrant was issued for fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement. My attorney called it procedural at that point. I called it the most beautiful document I'd ever seen. 8.5 by 11 inches of pure karma. 6 weeks after that ultrasound appointment, I made a suggestion. "What if we throw a celebration?" I said to Lucas casually. "A little baby moon party at my grandmother's estate, both families, close friends, a garden afternoon to celebrate the baby." His eyes lit up instantly, like a child on Christmas morning. More witnesses for his devoted husband act. More people who would pity him later. More sympathy to harvest when his wife was exposed. "That's a wonderful idea," he said, kissing my forehead in that gentle way that once made me feel safe. "Let me help plan it." "Oh no," I said lightly, patting his chest. "You've been working so hard lately, all those late nights. Let me handle everything. You just show up and enjoy it." He had no idea that my version of handling things included police officers waiting quietly in the guest house, my attorney positioned near the bar, Evan Rowe prepared to testify, every piece of evidence neatly organized in labeled folders. And his parents about to learn exactly who their son really was. The party was set for Saturday. That morning, Lucas spent nearly an hour in the bathroom, practicing expressions in the mirror, adjusting his tie, rehearsing that eager, glowing father-to-be smile. I watched him through the slight opening in the door. This man I'd shared a bed with for 3 years. This man I'd trusted with my future. My family. My heart. He believed he was walking into the highlight of his performance. He had no idea he was walking into his own ending. The Hart family estate looked breathtaking in late spring. My grandmother's gardens were in full bloom, 5 decades of careful tending exploding into color. White tents lined the back lawn. Champagne rested in silver buckets. Fresh flowers decorated every table. A string quartet played softly near the rose bushes. It was perfect. Exactly the kind of setting Lucas believed he deserved. About 50 guests wandered across the lawn in their Sunday best. Family, friends, colleagues. Lucas's parents had driven up from Maryland, beaming with pride over their accomplished son and his glowing, pregnant wife. My grandmother would have adored this gathering. She also would have seen through Lucas in under a minute. That's the thing about women who have lived long lives. They develop a radar for frauds the rest of us usually learn the hard way. Lucas was completely in his element. He worked the crowd like a seasoned politician at a fundraiser. Firm handshakes, confident laughs, easy charm polished over years of practice. Every time someone lifted a phone for a picture, his hand found my stomach. There he was, every single time, the devoted father-to-be, gazing at me with what looked like pure affection. He was incredibly good at pretending to be human. For a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The feeling lasted about 3 seconds, until I remembered the $50,000 he'd spent trying to ruin my life. Whatever sympathy existed disappeared instantly. His mother dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. "I always knew he'd be such a wonderful father," she told anyone within earshot. "Such a good boy, such a caring husband." His father moved through the crowd shaking hands, chest puffed out, proud of the legacy Lucas was supposedly creating, the Reed name continuing on. My mother stood quietly near the dessert table, watching Lucas with the calm patience of a cat observing a mouse that didn't yet realize the trap had snapped shut. She caught my eye across the lawn and lifted her champagne glass just slightly. Almost time. Around 3 o'clock, Lucas did exactly what I knew he would. For weeks, he'd been floating the idea of celebrating fatherhood with a DNA test, framing the results in the nursery, proof of their bond, something sentimental. Something staged. At the party, he brought it up again, loudly, making sure plenty of people were listening. "You know what we should do, sweetheart?" He pulled me close, arm wrapped around my waist, fully aware of the audience. "I've been thinking, we should get one of those DNA test kits." He smiled, playing the role perfectly. "We can frame the results for the nursery, proof that daddy and baby are connected forever. Wouldn't that be special?" A few guests sighed softly. His mother dabbed her eyes again. I hesitated on purpose. "I don't know," I said gently. "That sounds like a lot of trouble." "Oh, come on," Lucas said quickly. "It would be amazing. We could even open the results right here, make it part of the celebration." He turned to the crowd. "What do you think, everyone?" Murmurs of approval rippled through the guests. "How sweet. I wish my husband was that thoughtful." I glanced around, playing the shy, uncertain wife. "Well, if everyone thinks it's a good idea." Lucas was practically glowing. This was it. This was the moment he believed he'd been building toward. The trap he had spent more than a year constructing was seconds away from snapping shut. He could already imagine it. My humiliation, my reputation destroyed, my money within reach. What he didn't realize was whose neck was actually inside the trap. Instead of reaching for a DNA test kit, I walked toward the small platform set up near the fountain, the one meant for speeches and toasts. I stepped up and picked up the microphone. Lucas looked up at me from the crowd, champagne glass in hand, smiling confidently. I could almost see him rehearsing the expression he planned to wear later, the devastated husband, betrayed by his unfaithful wife. "Thank you all for being here today," I said, my voice steady as it carried across the lawn. "This gathering is meant to celebrate family, honesty, and truth." I locked eyes with Lucas. "My husband said he wanted to reveal something meaningful today," I continued, "so I'm going to help him do exactly that." His smile twitched. Just for a moment. The first fracture in the performance. I reached beneath the podium and pulled out a thick folder. "3 months ago," I said, "I learned something about my husband that shattered everything I believed about my marriage." The lawn was completely silent now. "I want to share it with all of you because Lucas is right. Today should be about the truth." His smile froze entirely. His champagne glass hovered halfway to his mouth. "Lucas and I struggled with fertility," I continued. "His medical diagnosis made natural conception impossible, so we pursued IVF at a clinic he personally selected." I lifted the first document. These are the clinic records, the original records before anyone had a chance to change them. I let the word hang. Original. Color drained from his face. "These records show that my husband bribed 2 clinic employees to switch his sperm sample with donor sperm." A ripple moved through the crowd. "He paid $30,000 to a nurse. He paid the embryologist. And he paid $15,000 to a donor." I gestured toward the edge of the gathering. "His name is Rowe." A young man stepped forward, 28 years old, a graduate student who believed he was helping an infertile couple, not committing fraud. He provided the sperm used to conceive my child, I said, without my knowledge, without my consent. Gasps spread through the guests. Lucas's mother clutched his father's arm. A champagne flute slipped from someone's hand and shattered against the stone patio. My husband's plan was simple, I went on. He intended to wait until our baby was born. Then he would demand a DNA test. I paused, letting the weight of it sink in. And when that test proved he wasn't the biological father, which he already knew would happen, he planned to accuse me of having an affair. I held up more documents. Our prenup contained an infidelity clause. If I had supposedly cheated, I would owe him $500,000. He could pursue additional damages. He could destroy my reputation. He could seize everything my grandmother had left me and walk away. Lucas found his voice. It was strangled, desperate. Alina, honey, this is insane. You're confused. It's the pregnancy, the hormones. You're not thinking clearly. I didn't flinch. My voice was ice. The crowd went silent. In addition to bribing the fertility clinic, I continued, my husband embezzled roughly $50,000 from clients at his firm to fund this scheme. I gestured toward a man standing quietly near the bar, Lucas's boss, discreetly invited. His firm is now aware and investigating. The man set down his drink. His expression said everything. I went on. My husband also has $180,000 in gambling debt, money owed to people who don't tolerate late payments, and for the last 8 months. I pulled out photographs, nothing explicit, just romantic enough to eliminate any doubt. He's been having an affair with his assistant. Lucas's mother made a sound that could have been a punch to the stomach. I displayed the photos, restaurant dinners, hotel entrances, enough evidence to remove any possibility of denial. This isn't even his first attempt, I added. 5 years ago in Boston, he targeted another wealthy woman. That relationship ended when she discovered irregularities in their joint account. She has provided a statement to investigators and is ready to testify. Lucas's champagne glass slipped from his fingers. It hit the stone patio and shattered. Champagne sprayed across his designer shoes. Those are lies, he stammered. She's making this up. I'm being slandered. She's unstable. Pregnancy has affected her mind. His mother's voice cut through the murmurs. Quiet, sharp, precise. Is any of this true? Lucas turned toward her, mouth open, ready to deny everything, but nothing came out. Then Lena Keller stepped forward from near the guest house, pale but resolute. I'm the nurse he bribed, she said. I have documentation. I've already given my statement to the police. A voice spoke from the edge of the crowd. I was paid $15,000, said Evan Rowe, stepping forward. He told me it was a private arrangement. I didn't know I was part of a fraud until Mrs. Wilson's investigator contacted me last month. Lucas's eyes darted wildly. Around him, faces that had laughed with him just 10 minutes earlier were frozen in shock. His colleagues, his family, the society friends he'd worked so hard to impress. Everyone stared at him, as if he were something decaying they had just found on the sole of their shoe. Then 2 police officers emerged from the guest house, walking calmly across the lawn. Lucas Reed, the first officer said in a professional, neutral tone. You're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Handcuffs clicked into place. Right there, in front of everyone. His mother was sobbing quietly now. His father refused to meet his eyes, staring at the ground as if he wished it would open and swallow him whole. As they escorted Lucas toward the police car, he made one last desperate attempt, one final manipulation. Alina, please, he said, voice cracking. We can work this out. I've made mistakes, but I love you. I've always loved you. Don't do this. Think about our baby. Think about our family. I looked at him, really looked. The man I had shared my life with for 3 years. The man I defended to my own mother. The man who stood at an altar, promising to love and protect me, all while calculating how much he could steal. "You're absolutely right, Lucas," I said calmly. "We just worked it out." They placed him in the back seat of the police car. I watched as it drove away down the long gravel path, past the gardens my grandmother had planted half a century ago, through the iron gates of the property Lucas had coveted so desperately. 50 guests stood frozen in silence. Then my mother walked over and put her arm around me. "I'm proud of you," she said softly. "Your grandmother would be too." For the first time in months, I breathed fully again. Lucas was denied bail. The judge called him a flight risk. Between his mounting gambling debts and the dangerous people he owed money to, the risk of disappearance was too high. Those gambling creditors lost patience the moment the arrest hit the news. The money train had derailed. His affair partner, the assistant he'd been sneaking around with for 8 months, resigned the morning after the party. She didn't even bother clearing out her desk. She sent an email and vanished. No loyalty, no second glance. I've seen rats abandon sinking ships with more dedication. At least rats glance back. Lucas's firm completed its internal audit within 2 weeks. $53,000 missing, confirmed. They filed criminal charges of their own. The woman from Boston, Caroline Ashford, came forward publicly once news of the arrest broke. She had spent 5 years feeling foolish for falling for his act, too embarrassed to pursue justice. Now she was. Her statement added another layer to the prosecutor's case. The divorce was finalized in record time. Lucas's lawyer attempted negotiation, but there was nothing to negotiate. The prenup's infidelity clause, the one Lucas had planned to weaponize against me, worked entirely in my favor. He was the one who had been unfaithful for 8 months. He owed me, not the other way around. Not that he had anything to give. Every asset he claimed to own was either borrowed, stolen, or imaginary. The criminal case moved forward quickly. Molly Brennan testified. The embryologist cooperated fully in exchange for a reduced sentence. Evan Rowe gave his statement. The paper trail Lucas thought he had hidden wasn't hidden at all. Fraud, conspiracy, embezzlement. Every charge stuck. Every charge carried years in prison. His parents stopped attending court after the first week. His father released a statement saying Lucas had made choices no parent could defend. His mother checked into a facility for exhaustion, what wealthy people call it when they can't face reality. Lucas Reed, the man who had walked into my life 4 years earlier with careful charm, would spend the coming years behind bars. When he eventually got out, he would have nothing. No money, no career, no family willing to acknowledge him, no future targets who wouldn't find his criminal record with a simple search of his name. The trap he had built so meticulously had snapped shut, around his own neck. My baby was born 4 months after the party, healthy, perfect, absolutely innocent in everything that had happened. Some people asked if I planned to contact Evan Rowe. I considered it, but he was a 28-year-old graduate student who had made a foolish choice for money he desperately needed. He wasn't ready to be a father, he didn't want to be, and I didn't need him to be. My child would have me. My mother, finally back in my life, would be there too. My child would have the Wilson family, the legacy my grandmother had built over decades of love, care, and determination. That was more than enough. That was everything. I learned something through all of this. Family isn't about DNA. It isn't about blood tests or charts or genetic matches. Family is about who shows up, who stays, who chooses you every day even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. My mother chose me when I didn't deserve it. I chose my baby, even when the circumstances were messy and complicated. That's what family truly means. Now, my mother and I had lunch every week, making up for 2 lost years, one conversation at a time. She never once said, "I told you so." Finally, I asked her why. She set down her coffee cup and smiled. "Because watching you take down that man," she said, was more satisfying than any 4 words could ever be. I laughed. The first real laugh I had felt in what seemed like forever. 3 weeks after the party, in the early morning, I sat in my grandmother's kitchen. My kitchen now, in the house Lucas had once coveted so desperately. Sunlight poured through the windows that had watched 4 generations of Wilson women live their lives. The same windows my grandmother had looked through while sipping her morning tea 50 years ago. I made myself a cup of chamomile, her recipe, her favorite brand. Some traditions are worth keeping. My phone buzzed on the counter, a message from my mother, lunch tomorrow. I smiled and typed back always. Outside, the gardens were in full bloom. The roses my grandmother planted as a young bride. The hydrangeas she added when my mother was born. The lavender border I had helped her install when I was 10, small hands patting dirt around each seedling while she told me family stories. I rested my hand on my belly and felt the baby move. Lucas Reed had tried to take everything from me. My money, my reputation, my future, my peace. All he actually did was reveal how strong I had always been. Some people spend their whole lives waiting for karma to arrive. I was fortunate. I delivered mine in person, with the evidence in front of 50 witnesses. My grandmother used to say that Wilson women don't break. We bend, we adapt, we survive. And when someone tries to burn us down, we rise from the ashes and build something stronger. Lucas thought he had married an easy target. He married a Wilson. Now he had plenty of time in a prison cell to reflect on that mistake. I took a deep breath, looking around at the house, the gardens, the life that was truly mine. And I knew no one, not even the most cunning of con men, could ever take that away from me again.